Jesse, this is a podcast about tabletop role-playing games called the John D. Mantis, where two curious nerds ask each other creative questions.
Well, that's a cool setup. I wish I would have heard of this before.
Yes, it has over 200 subscribers.
Wow.
Monthly, Jesse.
That's awesome. I don't know why I'm not listening to this. This sounds right up my alley.
Yeah, it's a bonus episode for this episode of the John T. Mantis. I'm Maddie, and Jesse is Jesse. I guess.
Yeah, sometimes.
And Jesse, I have a question for you for this bonus episode, since we're just kind of shooting the shit here.
Yeah, sure.
What are you working on?
Well, I've been having intrusive thoughts.
Maybe this is an After Dark episode.
Yeah.
John T. Mantis Nights.
It is. That's very appropriate for what those intrusive thoughts are. So, all right, here is the arc.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Things that exist. I saw that the second season of that Interview with the Vampire show on AMC had come out.
Oh.
And I really liked the first season. So I watched the second season and I liked it even more because I don't know if listeners of the John T. Mantis know this. If you've listened to every episode, you do. But if not, I really, really like vampires, and I really, really like Anne Rice, or I did when I was in high school. I'm re-listening to the Vampire Chronicles on Audible now, a thing that I keep referring to as a book on tape when I tell the young people I work with about it in the most cringy way possible.
Even though there is no tape involved?
Yeah. And I don't just say on Audible, I say a book on tape, which, it predates book on CD, the things I actually started listening to books on. So yeah, and I was like, oh yeah, there's this whole vampire-based role-playing game. Have you ever heard of it?
Would it be Vampire the Masquerade?
It would be Vampire the Masquerade.
What are the chances?
I know. I would have also accepted Vampire the Requiem, though that's not the one I plan on playing it.
Okay. And
then the other influence I had is I pretty recently went down to Galveston for a 6-year-old's birthday party.
And the 6-year-old was a vampire. I know where this is going.
Yeah. It was terrifying. I mean, like those, ancient eyes staring at you from a little 6-year-old's face. It's creepy. No, I just really liked the vibe of Galveston. And I was like, this would be a cool setting for a vampire role play. I really like. And next thing you know, I was at a comic store hawking 90s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles action figures and buying vampire books. I already had quite a few of them, to be honest. So I'm planning a nascent Vampire the Masquerade campaign set in Galveston, Texas.
Wow. All right. Yeah. I think you've mentioned Galveston, Texas. I think you've mentioned liking the vibe of Galveston, Texas before. And I remember thinking, I have never, ever thought in a million years I would hear anybody say, I really like the vibe of Galveston, Texas. But
it's like New Orleans, but cheaper.
Okay. That's what was my next question is, explain to me what the vibe is of Galveston, Texas, and how that relates to vampires.
It's humid.
Okay. Because vampires love the heat.
They do. It warms them up when they're cold because they're dead. No, I mean, it feels old. It feels like Galveston doesn't feel like Texas. Like Galveston is not anything I would have associated with Texas. It's its own distinct thing. And I loved that about it. Most of the houses you walk by are like old Victorians or things built in like the very early 1900s. After 1900, there was a thing that happened. It's sort of relevant. The deadliest natural disaster in the history of the United States of America. 17-foot storm surge killed between 6,000 and 12,000 people. No one really knows. So yeah. But yeah, it's got a very tropic vibe. It feels like it's got a French feel. It's got a Spanish feel. It doesn't feel like Texas. It's accessible. It's affordable. It's a little gritty. It's a little run down. And it's just, one of those things I was like, that whole feeling would be great for a vampire game.
I could see that. Yeah. It definitely has a little bit of a tie-in to Interview with the Vampire,
Yeah.
you know, setting
Yeah.
wise.
I definitely saw a house. I was like, Lestat is recovering in that house right now. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. He's like in the basement covered
yeah.
with dirt
Yeah.
in that house right over there. Yeah.
Uh-huh. The one across the street from this Airbnb we're staying at. Like this 1915 house is just like, what's this door go to? Ah, there's a Victorian ghost in there. Do not open that.
Yeah. There's an
So,
aged vampire coming out of torpor in your basement. And
oh, look at you using the terminology. I'm so impressed.
hey man, I do research sometimes.
So yeah, just for a general sense of vibe and setting, I kind of wanted to tell this story and what the themes are. And I'm using the Vampire the Masquerade language. It's a storytelling game, not a role-playing game. A
Oh.
storytelling game. You don't run a campaign, you run a chronicle.
Oh.
And the person running the game is the storyteller, not the game master or dungeon master.
Okay. Sounds like a
Ooh la
role-playing
la.
game.
Yes. um, so yeah, I don't really know exactly what the theme, one of the themes I want to have is decay.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is memory.
Okay.
And the way that I want to do this is I was looking around for ideas and there I found a video called from a YouTube channel called Strange Adventures. The guy
Okay.
has a lot of stuff about vampire, like how the mechanics work in Vampire 5th Edition or how you write a chronicle. And he had this little starting point setup that I thought was really great and would be something that transfers really well to any faction-based game. Like
Okay.
if you ever did Planescape, which has all those factions in it. So his advice was pick 3 factions, and then just describe the relationship between them. And that's like your starting political situation in the city. The other advice that I heard about Vampire is that you're running Vampire all wrong if you're not running it like it's a mob story, because vampires are mobs and you got to
Mm-hmm.
earn for your elder or you're going to be in deep shit. And it's like the laws of the Camarilla are basically the laws of the mafia, like the code of silence and like,
Mm-hmm.
like nobody's a made man unless the bosses agree. Like,
Uh-huh.
and I'm like, oh wow, shit, that's actually a great metaphor for that. Um, so that's kind of influencing my thing, but do you want to know about the 3 factions, or are you like,
Yes.
he's just telling me about this thing he's doing?
Oh, it's a bonus episode and I'm here for it, buddy.
Okay, cool. So the 3 factions I want to use, actually, the factions in the guy's video, like I was like, this is actually great. I want to use this. I want to use the Hakata, who are the clan of death,
Okay.
which is like all the necromancer vampire bloodlines kind of merged into one after they got, things changed between the last edition where like in the 90s they had ShrekNet and blah blah blah, and then September 11th happened and the NSA started monitoring everybody's cell phones and shit, and the government discovered vampires are real. And so there's like top secret CIA black sites, NSA people who like called First Light who go and put down vampires. So the Hakata got wrecked, and so all these bloodlines of necromantic vampires that have hated each other kind of reforged into this one clan. And I'm just like, yeah, the Hakata are there because there's a giant teaching hospital there. There's like an old ass cemetery, and like probably about 8,000 people died in like one afternoon on this island. Like,
wow. Okay.
so ghosts. Like
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
place, I mean, if like I'm not superstitious, I don't think I really believe in ghosts. I think it would be cool if ghosts were real.
Yeah.
I don't know that I believe in them, but that place felt haunted as shit. Like
Yeah.
in the daytime, walking
Yeah.
around in Galveston. Like I'm like, cool. Um, so yeah, that's one of them. The Anarchs are the other ones because I figure Galveston's too small for the Camarilla, who are the ivory tower, to really care about it much. They have Houston, nearby Houston, so there's the possibility for that tension. But the Anarchs have Galveston, the Camarilla have Houston, and then the third one is a new faction they've kind of introduced in the new edition, the Thin Bloods, also known as the Duskborn, who are vampires who were embraced, but their blood is so weak. Like some of them can walk out in the sun when they
Mm.
like with full clothes on, and some of them don't get fangs, and they don't really everybody kind of picks on them.
Mm-hmm.
So with that triangle right there, to me, that's where I would start my pitch to my players and say, here is the setting. Here's what I like about it. Here is this triangle of these three factions. Are you interested in playing as members of one of these factions, or do you want to be somewhere in between? So that's the start of my session 0 question to the characters.
Gotcha.
What do you think about that?
I like it. Yeah. I think that's a very appealing, like you've given the player characters three options. You've detailed each of these factions, what makes them unique, and where their place is in this power struggle. You've very give a very like delightful and detailed description of what the basically the world of the setting is. And then you leave it up to them to see if they want to choose one of the three things that you've put in front of them, but you've also left them the option of doing something that's not that. And I
Yeah.
think most people like me who have never really played a vampire or not, I have never played a Vampire the Masquerade game or anything like it. Um, there's no way in hell I'm going to choose the something in between option. I'm going to specifically try to go for something you've set down in front of me in order, unless I get a fucking hair up my ass and I buy a bunch of fucking books and I'm like, I want to play a fucking Nosferatu from, this type with these powers from this book. But when has that ever happened? So, you laying it out in front of me is I think is a great like give and take kind of scenario, right? Because the people who may not take that option are the people who are like dyed in the wool vampire players. They
Yeah.
already, you tell them you want to run a vampire game and they're like, cool, I know exactly what I want to do, you
Yep.
know?
Well, my next pitch is that if whatever group I wound up was a bunch of people that had never really played Vampire, didn't know much, I would suggest the Duskborn
Mm-hmm.
because nobody bothered to tell them shit when they got embraced. They kind of found each other. They know there's other stronger vampires out there who hate them for some reason, but they don't know what their powers are. They don't know what the rules are. They're just kind of like trying to survive and, you know, like get by. And so that's a whole different type of campaign, but there's still that power struggle where one of those factions might want to use them, one of those factions might want, because in one of the vampire religions, the existence of the thin blood is a sign of the end of the world, so they tend to kill them all to prevent the end of the world from happening.
Right. Right.
So that's fun.
For some reason, the way you were describing them, I was trying to think of like what their advantage would be. And I kind of thought of it in the context of like the Belters from The Expanse, where it's
Yeah,
like they can do things that the other vampire factions can't do for all of these different various reasons. And
that's such
that
a
has,
great metaphor.
right, like that has given them a certain level of like power and access because of it.
Yeah,
You
well,
know,
here's
like
the other thing. Here's the other thing they can do. They added this whole thing. Their blood's so mutable because it's thin. They have this power set called blood alchemy, where they like create meth labs and come up with these concoctions of like blood and copper and battery acid that like give them weird temporary powers. Like one of the ones I was reading today was called Friends List, that like you have to get another vampire's blood to put in it, but when you drink it, you can see a silvery web of lines connecting them to all their like known associates.
wow, yeah.
So there's all this cool like blood alchemy they can do to like really twist up vampiric powers and do one-off things and all kinds of all kinds of cool stuff like that. So that
I
also
like this
that
faction.
yeah, they're pretty cool. And they're very new. Um
Hmm.
so yeah, cool. So that's my basic political layout. Once they've picked,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have an adventuring party in Vampire, obviously. Uh, you have what's a coterie, uh, because vampires by nature are intensely competitive, predatory monsters. They don't always play well together. But they do form coteries, sometimes often across faction lines, um, with a specific goal or purpose. So I think the next step then in my session zero for this theoretical campaign, which the amount of time and level of detail I've laid out on this, I don't see how I can't not do it now. Um, that was so many negatives. Anyway, uh,
You just did a quadruple negative.
wow, talent. Uh, so there's a whole bunch of coterie types listed in the books.
Mm-hmm.
Like this type of coterie is guarding a site of mystic importance or the tomb of an elder vampire. This kind is literally just a street gang. That one's the Fang Gang coterie. So I'd let the players pick their coterie type before they pick a clan, before they pick a generation, before they pick any stats. So knowing their coterie type, they can pick core character concepts that make sense for that coterie.
Yeah.
Like that you could see why those vampires got drawn together.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a
Mm-hmm.
little bit more loosey goosey if they go with thin blood because they got drawn together because there's strength in numbers, and most of the supernatural beings in the city think they're rats. So
Yeah. Wow. I love it. Yeah, this is very appealing. Um, I think it's brilliant, the thin bloods element. I think that's a brilliant addition to this concept. Um, how many factions are there in Vampire, and why did you decide to go with these three?
um, there's a lot of I think even with new players they wouldn't know, but for me there's a lot of baggage with the Camarilla. So the main traditional vampire factions have been the Camarilla, who are like the basically we are the secret puppet masters of the world, like, they're all like hoity-toity uptight. The anarchs who are like, who the hell are you? Why are we going to let these older vampires tell us how to be vampires? We should be free, blah, blah, blah. And then there's the Sabbat, um, who are um, vampire supremacist monsters who don't see any purpose in maintaining humanity and are waging a war against the progenitors of the vampiric race. And they've really been sidelined in V5 did a lot of really cool things to kind of walk back the meta plot. Because vampire, I mean, you saw the shelf at our house with my vampire books when we lived together. Like, vampire has a lot of meta plot and backstory and history and all this stuff. And they kind of walked some of it back in ways that I thought are really cool. Like one of the play elements that was kind of a problem, I think, with the traditional Vampire the Masquerade is you had all these elder vampires hanging around in the city, and your PCs really couldn't go up against them. Like it would just be suicide. The power difference is just so vast, and they're so canny and cautious. Well, they put this thing in V5 called The Beckoning, where like all the elder vampires or vampires with very potent blood are hearing this beckoning call to the Middle East.
Hmm.
And so they're just leaving their domains. And so now the prince of the city might only have been a vampire for 80 years instead of somebody who was, alive in the year 1200. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so, and they made there is a Sabbat book that is basically like, there's no rules for playing these guys. These are monsters. These are the bad guys. They are antagonists. Um, like they are vampire supremacist monsters.
Mm-hmm.
This was actually really controversial. A lot of people were like, "No, why can't we play Sabat?" I'm like, "Because we're not fucking edge lords anymore." Like I grew up. Um,
Not everybody did.
yeah, and they're mostly involved in going off to the Middle East and trying to kill the rising,
Mm.
progenitors of the vampiric clans that are out there still.
Yeah. Our Queen of the
So
Damned.
yeah,
Like all the most powerful vampires suddenly heading to the Middle East and leaving a power vacuum behind them. Yeah.
yep.
Mm-hmm. I
So
love
that
it.
power vacuum makes it really playable. Another thing I think they really did that was super cool is um they made like they brought in a humor system,
Okay.
like the humors of the blood.
Uh-huh.
And that really matters for blood alchemy and for learning disciplines and for getting mechanical bonuses. If you drink someone who is sanguine's blood, like it
Mm-hmm.
has a particular flavor and it also has a mechanical benefit. So they gave a reason for you, for like vampires to try and farm mortals or like manipulate their emotions. They really dialed back the superheroes with fangs aspect that was kind of there in the 90s, and are like, these are really bad people who
Yeah.
do really terrible things and walk this line between getting worse and more terrible, or in like losing their minds, and then just, making sure that they stay fed so they don't go off on somebody. It is. There's even the dice mechanics in fifth edition are great. I'm sorry, I'm just rambling about vampire now.
Oh, keep going. This is a bonus episode. That's what they're for.
Okay, so here's the cool thing that they did in fifth edition. They got this mechanic called the hunger dice.
Okay.
Okay, so you have a hunger rating from 1 to 5. When your vampire wakes up in the night or during the day, you roll a 10-sided die. Sorry, when they wake up at night, they roll a 10-sided die. If you succeed, you're fine. If you fail, your hunger goes up. It's called a rouse the blood check. If you want to send your blood flowing through you to make your cheeks flush and make it look like you're breathing so you can pass as a human, it's a rouse the blood check. Make it, you're cool. Fail it, your hunger goes up.
Gotcha.
You want to use one of your vampiric powers, most of them, rouse the blood check. Make it, you're okay. Fail it, your hunger goes up.
Love it.
Hunger dice. So, I mean, I don't know if you remember playing Exalted. It's a White Wolf game.
Mm-hmm.
So when you roll dice, you basically have a pool of attributes, an attribute plus an ability. Whatever your number of dots in the attribute is added to the number of dots in an ability, and that's how many 10-sided dice you roll.
Right.
With me so far?
Mm-hmm.
So you might be rolling a pool of 6 dice. The hunger dice replace dice in that pool. So
Okay.
if I roll 6 dice normally,
Mm-hmm.
I would replace in my hunger's 3. I would replace 3 of those dice with hunger dice.
Nice.
And the hunger dice have a symbol on them. Like you need 2 10s to get a critical. But the hunger dice have a bestial critical on them.
Oh, okay.
So like you can critically succeed at your action because your hunger drove the beast to do it in a way that is very clearly supernatural.
Yeah.
And and probably a breach of the masquerade.
Right.
Or you do it and you do it really well, but now the GM can give you a compulsion of your hunger or the blood to be like, and you can't stop staring at this person you're trying to have this dinner with's neck. You just
Mm-hmm.
staring at it
I love
like
it.
yeah. And I'm just like, that is so cool. It makes, oh, here's the other thing. You always have at least one hunger dice. You cannot reduce your hunger to 0 unless you drink someone to the point of death,
Oh, wow. Okay.
which, depending on how you set up campaign, could lead them to degenerate and lose humanity and get closer and closer to just falling to being a mindless animal.
I love it.
Like it's
Yeah.
really, really cool. I love it. For other people who listen who may be old World of Darkness heads, fight me.
A lot of the great drama that's tied up in vampires as protagonists is that struggle between being a monster and am I even still a person anymore? Like how
Yeah.
much of my humanity is even left? And um all the things you just described, I love because it seems like those are intended to develop and explode that drama. And
Yeah.
I'm all in favor of mechanical elements that don't just serve a mechanical purpose, but also help the character come out during session, like help you role play your character. You know, it's like it this is a terrible example, but it reminds me much in the same way of using like dark side dice or dark side points from the D20 Star Wars system, where
Yeah.
it's like, if you want to accomplish this, and you want a little extra oomph or a lot of extra oomph, you can use the dark side points, and like it will hasten your descent to a possible collision with the dark side, which is a huge element of Star Wars, which is a great way to put it in the mechanical interests of the game. So yeah, I'm here for it.
Another mechanical thing you do too, because there is this whole mechanical humanity system where your humanity can fall. I mean, it's technically possible to rise, but it's mostly just going to fall.
Mm-hmm.
um, when you do your session 0, you create 3 chronicle tenets, which are like the moral code that breaking causes a potential loss of humanity, and you establish those as the player group. So it could be like killing a mortal is one of them, because that's the kind of campaign we want to do. But it could be like breaking your sworn word is one, if you want to do like a street level gangster game, like like you can pick. And I thought that was such a cool choice, that like everybody sits down and like figures out this is the chronicle tenets, and you have a relationship map that you write these on, and then you draw the web of connections between the various characters and NPCs, and when you play you have that out in front of you, and
I love that.
picks up stains and names and crossed off, and it's just really, I think, really well thought out.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fucking awesome. You had mentioned you didn't know which group you were going to put this in front of without like outing individuals in each group. Can you give like a rough, or maybe you can't do this, maybe this is impossible, but can you give like a rough overview of each group and why you would or would not run this game for them in order to help you decide like which group you want to pitch this to?
I think with the options I have available, there's no group I wouldn't want to run this for.
Oh,
And I
okay.
think I might wind up in a situation where I run it for more than one group.
Would you
Like with
how many groups do you have? So first and foremost.
Oh, right now I have 3.
Okay.
Well, okay, 4 if you count the work group. Like,
So would you run it for 3 out of 4 groups?
no, I'd probably run it for 2, because just there's a lot of overlap between A team and B team.
Mm-hmm.
If they were cool about playing different characters in the same chronicle framework, I mean, if I did that then too, as we fleshed it out, I could eventually like write up a Galveston by Night book and publish it on the Storyteller's Vault.
What if you did um what if you did a game for multiple groups and it's taking place at different parts in the city? Like
I
those
think
are
at
events
different
that are happening
times
in the
in the
background.
city would be the way to do that.
Like different time periods,
Yeah,
or
different time periods of the city.
so how much time are we talking about? Like 20 years, 10 years, 1 year, 6 months?
I mean, like here's the party that's, in the 1880s. Here's the
Mm,
party in the decade after the hurricane of 1900. And here's the modern party. Like,
that's awesome.
yeah, there's another cool system in it called Memoriam,
Let's
where
hear about it.
like your vampire can choose to enter into Memoriam and like relive a memory from like earlier in their life, like to focus in on it in this almost trance. And you can have the other PCs play NPCs that were there, or if their characters were there, and be like, wait, what did happen the night of the fire at the Opera House in Paris? And then like you just do a Memoriam session, and then they discover what they were looking for and then come out of it. But you all get to play this like vampire flashback that I'm like, that is so cool. If your vampire's old, like,
That would be a really cool way to kind of mix the groups
yeah,
temporarily.
yeah, that would,
Like what would one group do if you're like, hey everybody, for this session and this session only, Jeff will be joining us. He's
yeah.
from the other group that's 100 years later, and he's gonna have a fucking memory. And we're all just gonna play this out as if it's because it's happening to your characters in real time. That would be fucking awesome.
Yeah, I've been as I've been reading books, I spent a whole bunch of money from Ninja Turtle books on vampire books, and I've been reading them. Like I'm just like getting ideas that I'm actually sticking, things I'm excited about putting in as just I'm like inspired in a way that I usually don't. I'm focused, not inspired.
Mm-hmm.
I'm focused in a way I usually don't get because of my many diverse games and many diverse, you know, uh shifting interests. But I just like keep thinking about things I want to do because like it's Galveston. So there's a discipline called the bond famulus where like a vampire can feed its blood to an animal and that animal becomes like their familiar. And then there's another one like higher rank called the master's voice where it can put a message in that familiar and then it goes and finds the target and then people like hear the voice of that vampire
Ah.
delivering the message coming from the familiar. But I'm like, it's fucking Galveston. What if the party is like walking on the beach one night hunting and they see a shark fin cutting the wave and a shark comes up and tells them you are needed at the pyramid. And then just swims back off into the dark ocean. I'm like, how creepy is that?
Creepy and hilarious.
I know. That's like my Venn diagram.
Are your other groups as goofy as our group that our Sunday night group or a group that I'm in?
Uh yeah, in different ways.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But I don't see, given our am I being too silly episode, I don't really see it as a problem. Like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I might actually, if it does become a problem, do that. Okay, guys, we're gonna do this symbol. This is out of character.
Mm.
We'll put in some breaks, but we're gonna get
Holding
hard
up
in the
two
scenes.
fingers. Mm-hmm.
Yep,
For
two
our audio
fingers. You're out of
listeners.
character. You can do your thing.
I love it. If you decide to do this game in 5 years when I'm done with the 1 to 20 game, let me know.
I should have it mapped out by then. So.
Yeah. Dude, I plan to not have this 1 to 20 game go for 5 years. So, if you decide to pitch this to us, I'm all about it. For the first
Nope.
time in my life, I'll actually play Vampire the Masquerade.
Hell yeah. I think the virtual tools work really, really well too, because if you have a scene with multiple NPCs that are much more common in
Mm-hmm.
Vampire than they
Mm-hmm.
are in like say a D&D game, you can just have like the portraits on the screen, like this is who's in the room, like who do you want to talk to? So
Gotcha. Cool,
so
cool,
this has
cool.
been Jesse Talks About Vampire.
Yeah, I love it. This is a bonus episode of the Jaunty Mantis. And Jesse, where can our listeners, how can they actually reach out to us with any feedback about this episode? Maybe they play Vampire. Maybe they love your idea. Maybe they have things they want to say about it. How would they get in touch with us?
They can send their rat familiar with the recording of their voice through the secret byways beneath the city. As we all know, we can't write email or put anything on the internet. The NSA has got all these code words. AI is monitoring it. We'll just get no, you can email us at jauntymantis@gmail.com. And yeah, jauntymantis@gmail.com.
Perfect. Until our next episode, get out there and play some fucking role playing games or some shit.
Or don't. I mean, it's your life.
Yeah. I mean, play a story game, become a storyteller.
Tell a chronicle. Weave a chronicle with your words, storyteller.
That's right.